The bird, despite the fact that everything was against us, it was wet and one thing and another, took off and chased and caught a hen pheasant. But on the other side of the stream, on the other side of this little valley, suddenly there's a tumble and they ended up in the water. And obviously I'm quite alarmed at that, but couldn't quickly get to them.
Hey, how's it going, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Told podcast, and also the conclusion of this Cape Falconry Club series. Thank you all for tuning in each episode of the series. I really hope that you enjoyed it, got something out of it, and I'm very thankful again to the Cape Falconry Club for the privilege of being able to help bring their falconry stories out to the rest of the wider world. Be some memories that I'll live with for the rest of my life. So once again, thank you all for that. And also thank you again to the Falconry Heritage Trust and their role helping make this series happen as well. Without their small grant to help pay for some of the airfare and travel expenses and things associated with this trip, it probably wouldn't have been able to happen. So thank you again to them, and if you wish to find out more about their organization and maybe help donate to their cause of helping to continue to preserve falconry heritage around the world, just head to falconryheritage.org. And also a big thank you to Baba Yaga Crafts out of Poland for their continued support. If you haven't had a chance to check out any of their really nice products yet, I really highly recommend you do so. You can get their contact information off our website at falconrytold.com or check them out at Baba Yaga Goshawk on Instagram. Some really great stuff, really makes some nice anklets and jesses and some other equipment. And as I stated before, it's all handmade, really nice quality stuff. So I highly recommend you check them out. If you haven't yet, you definitely won't regret it. And in this second bonus episode of the Cape Falconry Club series, we conclude the series with another falconer from the UK who is also in attendance at the meet, being Steve Eastwood. And in this conversation, we talk about flying Harris hawks and also some other things that I find interesting because we can't really do them here in the United States, which is using ferrets and falconry and things like that. So once again, thank you all so very much for sticking with us during our travels, and I hope you have really enjoyed this series and found it as informative and entertaining as I did while I was recording all these episodes with these really awesome falconers. So thank you all again for continuing to listen, and here in the coming weeks we'll be switching up gears a little bit here and have some other cool conversations for you to hear, and also be starting another couple series for you all as well. So in the meantime, enjoy this last episode of the Cape Falconry Club series with Steve Eastwood. Here we go. Well, nice to meet you, Steve. I'm glad that we could manage to make something of the day so far. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, as we were talking about earlier, this week won't be a complete washout. You know, I hope that there will be at least one day that we can see some birds fly. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think the South African falconers are fairly robust in their, how they will fly and the conditions that they'll fly in. They're adventurous.
Obviously, I was telling Tian and some of these other guys earlier. I was just like, well, I commend you all because I consider us pretty avid hardcore falconers where I'm from. I mean, we go at it pretty regularly and pretty hard. But if there's lightning outside, you're probably not going to see us out.
That's right. That's right.
And here we are driving around in these muddy back roads and these farms, and it's lightning and So has this been kind of your experience the time that you've been out here? Or?
The weather this time, it's a little bit earlier in winter, I think. So we're hitting the wet, bad weather, and I think they've had an unusual season where there's been a lot of rain, unusually so. Maybe that's global warming. I don't know. But I've been here before, and the weather was a lot kinder. We saw some tremendous flights and memorable flights. But yeah, I'm like you. Wind, rain, yeah, we can cope with when it's as heavy as it is here, and thunder and lightning. Maybe not safe. Not safe to be on hills and open land. Yeah, and even snow. I think nothing of flying in the snow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's all just kind of part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, we both come from areas where that's pretty regular in our climates, and honestly, I mean, I don't know about you, but I usually look forward to snow.
Yeah. It's another facet. It's another interesting, problem to deal with. But I think the old saying of there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
Well, I think I agree with that up into a point, as far as, well, if you're getting struck by lightning, I can't really think of much clothing that's gonna.
Yeah, parka's just not gonna cut
that. No. I mean, even if you just encased yourself in, full rubber suit and everything else, that kind of electricity, you're not going to be really, it's not going to do much. So
no.
Yeah, but well, I mean, so this is kind of another unique chance, at least, to. I'm glad, like I said, we could kind of salvage the morning a little bit and fit a couple of recordings in while there's not really a whole lot going on, and I know. From the perspective of being an outsider looking in and being, this is my first time here. I've not been to South Africa. I've not been on this continent before.
Yes.
So, I mean, you mentioned that you've been here before, and, you have mutual acquaintances, like as do I.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's kind of a unique chance to get a conversation in with another falconer, also from another country, that kind of, just to kind of talk a little bit about, some of the things you've seen here, and like what have been some of the really cool and fascinating things that you've had a chance to witness personally and stuff. So,
well, I think the one glaring thing is that in the UK there's very little structure to falconry, or those that are practicing falconry. In South Africa, that's very, very different, and it's very structured, which I think is fantastic that, they're allowed to do that and tie in with the conservation needs of the government. And it does seem to work very well. I sometimes think we need a little more structure in the UK, because in the UK, pretty much you go and buy a bird, a captive bred bird, and it doesn't matter what experience, what knowledge, and people resort to learning from YouTube or whatever social media, which is not really helpful, because at the end of the day, it's the bird's welfare that's paramount. Yeah. So I do like what I've seen of the South African. The club system, where to be a member of a club, you've got to have that support around you, and you've got to be in some way scrutinised as to how you're performing and how you're behaving. And I think really that is something that the UK, I don't think they've got the will to do it, but I think that would be a real advantage, and maybe just formalise what falconers are doing, because it can be many things, from keeping birds badly or performing very well with birds. But I think the thing here is there's such vast open areas that it's. Certainly the long wing flying is impressive.
Yeah, no, and I know the first thing that kind of caught my eye whenever I first landed and just saw just a basic layout of how the land is here and stuff, I thought it was very interesting. I mean, I've been places where, you've got ocean. I've been places where you've got mountains, and I've been places where, you have both, but you have to drive a ways to see both. But I haven't been anywhere before really where you've got one right next to the other. You've got,
that's right.
and it's been a really nice combination of scenery here. And, I figure, it's weird because there's been places so far over the few days that I've been here where it's like, okay, well, this area kind of reminds me of parts of Idaho, or like this area reminds me of parts of, this, that, and the other. But there's always little differences though. And, I mean, where you fly in the UK, I mean, what do you have mainly to deal with there?
Well, it's a lot more enclosed, so, and land's at a premium, really. Not the vast open spaces that are here, and I guess, in the States. A lot of the farms, they refer to the farms here, and they're miles and miles across, but, in the UK, we're talking about acres rather than hectares and miles. Very enclosed, lots of woodland, but a good range of grassland and crops and things like that to fly over. Quarry-wise, game birds, pheasant, partridge, and ground game, hares and rabbits are the main quarry for most falconers in the UK. The big thing is getting permission to fly on that land. Personally, I would never go on land and without permission, because I just think it's just a bad account of falconry to just go on somebody's land. And in the past, I've owned land, and certainly I would have been very upset if somebody just felt that they could just treat it as though it was their own. So getting access to good land that's holding quarry is always challenging, and I think most falconers are always on the lookout for the next piece of permission that they might go to.
Yeah, and I can imagine, especially having done like I was telling you earlier, like the series for the UK, and talking to so many people there, it's a very common theme. Yeah. And I mean, from having to even just not only just get permission, but then sometimes having to pay, to have privileges to hunt on said land and everything else, and not only that, but you're dealing with so many different people as competition for very small, little sections of possible places to hunt. And remind me again where you're from. Is it
in North Yorkshire?
North Yorkshire.
So in the north of England.
Okay.
Very rural area. Fortunately, if you pick the right quarry, a lot of landowners are quite happy for you to to go on there. But I have a thing of if I always ask the first question, could I come on and fly my bird on here? And the next question would be, does anybody else come on here, either shooting or flying birds? And if somebody's flying birds, I'll say, okay, there's somebody on here, and just leave, I'll move on, and rather than feel that it could be shared. And sometimes it's the it's the landowner's decision if he wants people on. But I think that out of fairness, doing people a fair deal, if somebody's already got the permission, I'll back away every time. So not everybody is going to have that same approach, but that's a little thing that I would do. And I say I would never go on land without permission. I would never encroach on somebody else's permission, unless I was invited to. and then it'll go. And I'm quite happy to take part in, little field meets or meetings and watch other people's bird flyers just as much as mine.
Well, and being in more like northern England, then do you also try and hunt any in Scotland or some of the surrounding areas at all?
I don't go up to Scotland. Sorry, I have been up to Scotland and I've flown and had some good experiences up there where the land is a little bit more open, and a bit more extensive for you to fly. I've flown in Ireland. Gone over to Ireland and taken part in field meets there. Again, good fun. And of course, we can, if unlike here, we can take our birds, and there's always an amount of pleasure in being able to put your birds, I suppose, on show and show what they can do and how well or how badly they're trained.
One thing that I really have kind of been surprised about is some of their policies here in South Africa, as far as just their inability to just take a bird across borders and stuff. Because as you probably know, in the States, there are some states that if you do bring a bird across, into certain states, they want you to kind of have a clean bill of health from a vet or something. Not all states are, require those things, but like for the most part, we can go from state to state and be just fine, and it's not an issue. And as long as we have hunting licenses and appropriate things, in other states, but I'm kind of like, it's kind of been surprising a little bit to learn how, they do things here to some degree.
But if it works for them, and I'm not one for having a system just for the point of having a system, but if the system seems to work and it generally, I think it does, and I'm sure there'll be loopholes that people could explore if they wanted to, but I think it's that thing about being open about about what your activity is. In the UK, quite an anti-hunting movement. And I feel sometimes we shouldn't try to be secretive or to hide what we're doing, but we should say, no, this is what we're doing, and you tell us what is wrong with that, because I think, as I say, the anti-hunting movement don't particularly understand, and if we don't tell them, how will they understand? They don't have to agree, but at least we get some sort of common ground. And generally, in the area I'm hunting, have very few people that would strongly criticize what you were doing if you explain it to them. In fact, most of the time, they're just a little bit more interested. And so what happens then and what happens then, full of questions and sort of go away. And I think at least you've represented the, falconry in as best as you can. But yeah, here, I think I do like their system. I like that there's an amount of control it's required, but it's also that implication that we can be open about, or that the falconers here can be open about what they're doing, and that it fits in with the conservation for the area, which is a big thing for here.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, as I've had the discussions before, even as soon as last night, with Andre, and it's impossible to have a perfect system. Mm-hmm. And you can just, like you said, it works for them. Whatever system works for whatever place, there's usually a reason for it. Mm-hmm. And you do your best to tweak things and make them fit as much as possible But ultimately, yeah, I mean, there needs to be some degree of accountability, and you do want to control whatever narrative in a positive way, so that you have a leg to stand on, I think my experience has been kind of like yours. Even people that have a preconceived notion, even if it's negative, once they get a chance to actually be included, and if they're open-minded enough to actually give it a chance to at least see if it's really as bad as what they think it is or whatever, normally their minds change pretty quick. I mean, even if they don't necessarily agree with the final outcome and what you're trying to do, they think it's really incredible seeing this relationship between men, or people and men and women and their birds, and what they're doing. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. That to see the bond, to see the cooperation between the bird and the falconer, and dogs, or whatever you're using, but they see that bond and they like it, and if they do go and venture out with you and once they get to see some beautiful parts of the countryside that they probably never have access to. And I have one landowner where I have permission, and when I've asked him, sort of his feelings about the hunting, one of the things he said to me, and I thought, yeah, this is fair. That was fairly astute, fairly, poignant. And he said, I see falconry as the purest form of hunting. He said, it's not going out with a gun, it's not going out with a rifle, stalking and all that sort of thing. It's one animal, a bird, against another animal, and the chance of failure for the hawk or the falcon, and and success for the quarry. And I think a lot of times it's in the quarry's favour, that it's their territory. They're we're sort of entering into their territory and their way of life, and it does work well for them at times, and some of the best flights I've had, without doubt, have been where the birds had no success, had a tremendous flight, but the quarry's got away because it's outsmarted the bird or whatever, or it's been just too good. And I'm amazed at times, and not quite to applauding because I've got a bird on my fist by that. But I feel that, that's fair. That's fair game, fair sport.
Well, and I think that we all have moments where, whether we would like to admit it or not, especially if it is our bird that's out of the box at that moment in time, every so often we do find ourselves rooting for that bunny or rooting for that, because, it's just putting on this just incredible display. And, I think that's something that is kind of lost at times when people that are anti whatever, I think a lot of times they think that we don't like, or we don't have any respect for, and this is maybe just I don't know, it could be a misconception on my part. I don't know, but I think that people don't realize how much we respect what we're hunting. Yeah. And, I'm kind of like you. One of the coolest things I've ever seen is seeing, a cottontail or a jackrabbit, or whatever, like some of the ways they outmaneuver these hawks, and they'll wait until just last second, and they'll leapfrog over, and hurdle, or whatever, and borderline somersault over these birds and stuff just to get away, and some of those things are really what makes your day sometimes, as much as it's a bummer sometimes to not necessarily have anything in the bag. I mean, you come out of it with a great memory.
Yeah, that's right. And again, I've seen virtually, as you've described there, and I've seen rabbits running up walls, run along the top, and the bird sort of tries to catch it, and it just either doubles back or jumps off the wall and goes the complete, just completely, throws the bird offline, and I sort of think, yeah, that was clever. That was so clever by like by the bunny rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you just really respect that. It's like, well, how many times did that rabbit have to do that before? I mean, how many times has it had to do that to learn that trick? And I mean, it's just like I said, it's incredible. But yeah, I mean, overall, yeah, like no system is perfect, but ultimately we just have to find our little niches and stuff and live within them and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, without doubt. And as I say, I think if you can be open about what you're doing, I will tell people many times, come with me. It's not a secret. I'm not doing anything that I would be ashamed of, or you wouldn't be invited, I'm sure. It's come, and I'm quite happy and quite proud that if somebody wanted to come and watch what was happening, do it, and I can explain everything and why, and all the intricacies if they're really that interested. But I don't do it, and even the landowners, I will always say to them, "Come with me, come with me. I'm on your land. You can see what I'm doing, and then that because their neighbours or other visitors to their land might think that's really not the right thing." And at least, the landowner will know that, well, actually, what I've seen, it was fairly good, and it's not as you think it wasn't. They might be able to even sort of defend us a little bit, because I think we need that support at the moment, and the only way we can do it is by showing it in showing falconry in a good light. I really do.
Yeah, and controlling the narrative and doing our best to, I mean, just making sure that people really truly understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Well, I think, now would be a good time to go ahead and just transition to, I mean, what started you in falconry? What got you interested? What was the moment?
I was like many young Yorkshire lads, and at the time the film Kes was out, and I've got to say that has had such an impact on so many people in a lot of facets, but there was that thing. So, and it was, it was a film that was memorable for a lot of people. And then I had an opportunity where my wife went on a falconry course down in Gloucestershire. And we'd got an interest in birds of prey, and she went there, and then came back and returned with a pair of common, don't like saying common, European buzzards that had been loaned to us to sort of see how you go on with those, which was fantastic and a real opportunity. And as you can imagine, I was told many times about how I was doing things wrong, but between us, we both had an interest. So between us, we sort of developed from there, and had a number of birds, and have had a number of birds at the time. So I'm talking maybe 32 years ago. There wasn't the internet. There wasn't the social media to rely upon. So you had to sort of, I suppose, not learn by your mistakes. That's the wrong thing to be doing, I think, when you're involving an animal. But to reason it through. If I do this might be the result. If I do that, that's definitely going to be the result, and I'm going to end up being on the wrong end of a bird's claws, or something. So we sort of learned together and developed. We sort of developed what we were doing and developed our knowledge. I would like to think. I'm sure we've picked up one or two things over the years, but. There was a sort of quite. There were clubs available that didn't always appear to be welcoming, and I can understand that, because at the time there were some real strong animal liberation groups that people who were involved in any hunting had to be, I think, aware of and perhaps wary of even. So I can understand that the clubs weren't so perhaps welcoming to novices. I think that's significantly changed, and I think most clubs in the UK are very helpful, very welcoming, really will try and guide people. But yeah, as I say, we've continued, we've had some good times, some good opportunities to go to other countries, experience, falconry experiences all over. And we've had a good time doing it, and I still have fun and still have, no matter how bad the weather gets, no matter how grim or how poorly the birds perform, still have fun doing it and meet with friends, and we do it. People I've not seen for a long time. All we're talking about all the time, all we're messaging each other about is about the falcons or the birds, the hawks, and where are you up to now and all this. So there's like a common interest. The common interest is also, a real good social group, really, I think.
Well, what have you been up to now? And what has been your kind of most recent? I mean, what have you been flying recently? And,
so recently I've been flying, and over the last 10 years I've been flying a Harris hawk. At times maligned in the UK, in deference to the goshawks, and I've flown goshawks, I've flown long wings.
It's the same in the States. I mean.
Yeah,
it's fine.
But a Harris hawk that's coming up to his 10th season this coming winter in the UK, and he's tremendous. He's probably the best bird that I've had, and I have so much fun with him, and he's quite successful. He's very successful. He's very clever, as Harris hawks are as a species. And I think the people that malign them perhaps don't ever fly them to try to get the best out of them. And I think if you put the time in, I suppose it could be said across any involvement with animals, if you put the time in, you get the rewards. But I really do sort of fly my little Harris hawk, who has a heart that's as big as an ox, and he'll just keep trying and trying, and is very, very loyal and bonded. Captive bred, not an imprint, and I just enjoy every time I go out with him. The advantage that I have with him is that if I go out with friends, is that he will respond to them, not quite as much as he will with me, but he will respond to them. So I can always give somebody the opportunity to, put the glove on. Okay, hold your hand up and off we go. And I can remember the first time a bird flew free back to me and back to the fist, and that feeling. And I never forget that, and I never overlook that. So if I can, even if it's just somebody who's come to watch, or I can give them the opportunity to, fly him to you. Have you ever had a bird fly to you? Fly him to you. I'm not talking about doing displays. I'm not talking about, anything other than giving somebody the opportunity. And then hopefully they go away and think, wow, that was tremendous. And they understand a little bit more about the feeling that you have, certainly with a Harris, where it's following your saw. My bird will go on the saw when he's soaring above you, but then comes in and checks the glove every time you put your hand up and that sort of thing. And I love it now. I just think, if people get that brief exposure to what we're doing and go away happy and go away thinking a little bit more about it, and it's got to be, a good sort of reflection on what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Harrises especially are a great PR bird usually.
Yeah.
I mean, do you have dogs at all? Do you incorporate dogs in your falconry too?
I do. And, it's difficult. I have a Vizsla and a Spaniel. The Spaniel works very, very hard and very, very quickly, and sometimes just a little bit too quick for the Harris Hawk. But I also use, it's customary in the UK to use ferrets to bolt rabbits. So I have ferrets as well, and it's that's all part of the team.
Well, describe that a little bit then, because I mean, I've talked to other guys that have used ferrets, but it's kind of more just been like in passing. But I mean, how did you go about training them to do that and incorporate them, especially with a hawk?
So a ferret's essentially a big stoat or a weasel. It will go down to ground. Some are better than others and what you're hoping for is that when you put the ferret down into a rabbit hole, is that it'll check the warren. It'll let you know if it'll very quickly pick up on any movement down there. And you're hoping that the rabbit will bolt and that you'll produce a chase. What the Harris Hawks do, and I would suggest goshawks to an extent, European goshawks to an extent, they realise that the ferret is part of the team. Obviously, with a Harris Hawk being a social hunter, it's far easier. But there's also, I think, something about the way that a rabbit moves when it's being chased from its burrow. That's very different to how a ferret moves when it comes out. Ferret comes out and looks, and almost sort of that meerkat thing of looking around. Where did it go? Where did it go? But they do have quite a relationship and let's say part of the working team. And you would start that by just letting the hawk be somewhere perched where it can actually see the ferret in the initial stages. I think in the last 20 years, I've only seen one Harris Hawk attempt to catch a ferret.
Yeah.
And it didn't go particularly well. It wasn't a good experience for either of them. It was a juvenile hawk that I think was perhaps being flown a little bit to appetite more than anything. And it swooped in, took hold of the ferret, which is not going to surrender to a hawk, and a quick nip, I think, of the bird's foot, and it suddenly let go.
Yeah. Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. Yeah. And I say that's probably once in the last 20 years that I've seen that. So I think if they're introduced together, but it certainly does. You can almost sense that as you put the ferret down, very quickly you can hear sometimes the rabbit running around. So there's the anticipation there, and that's one thing for me with hunting rabbits with a hawk. It's that anticipation that's the exciting thing. Then you get the flight. Then hopefully you get the catch, and you do what we do and dispatch and move on to the next flight, whether it's your bird or somebody else's bird.
Well, and as far as the actual training of the ferret, I don't really know anything about that either. I mean, is there really anything you have to do to train the ferret? Or?
Well, not particularly, because
Just so instinctive.
It's just an instinctive thing for them to want to go in, and they're just very inquisitive. Generally, they are. They're fairly dormant. They will sleep something like 16 hours a day. But then when they're active, and they do become very active, and then there's a thing of personal preference as to whether it's the sort of the bigger males that you use or the females are generally smaller. I have both, so invariably I will use the small female. If I think there's rabbits that are really staying to ground and not wishing to bolt, then I might use the bigger one, and he'll, a rabbit will run past a small ferret in the burrow and push its way past it, but with a bigger male ferret, perhaps not so easily, and creates the bolt. So I do like using. I'll use both, but I do like using the bigger hob. The other thing is that because he's bigger, he's having to move a little bit slower around the rabbit warren. So that gives the rabbit the opportunity to leave the warren and to bolt and create that chase, But in terms of training, no, other than regular handling, so that they're familiar with you. Some ferrets come out of a rabbit warren, certainly if they've been up behind a rabbit, come out and they're a bit fiery.
Rearing to go.
They're a bit fiery. And that's where your handling has to come in, that it knows that, your hand's not anything like a bunny rabbit to try and grab hold of. Yeah. But I enjoy it all. And there are times when you just sit at the end of the day and you might have you're feeding your bird up, you've got the ferret there, and everything's good with the world, and you just get on with what are we doing tomorrow? Yeah. Don't feed him too much.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good problem to have, whenever you're thinking ahead and kind of reflecting on the success of the day. And yeah. Well, and so I guess now would also be a good time to talk about, one of those one or two favorite or memorable stories that you have, there's always at least one or two that come to mind, but what story is kind of like one of your favorites that always kind of just pops in when you kind of reminisce?
Oh my, there are so many, and I've had such good fun, particularly with this Harris shot that I've got at the moment. But yeah, it's hard to sort of separate one from the rest, because it's just that general. It really is a general thing of that bond of working with the animal. I've had some moments where things haven't gone to plan, and I'd like to pretend that they had gone to plan, but I've had some tremendous chases. I've had one that I was out with some people who I didn't know particularly well, and the bird went across a valley. There'd been some heavy rain up in Yorkshire, and what should have been pretty much a stream that you could step over wasn't, and it was fairly torrential. And the bird, despite the fact that everything was against us, it was wet and one thing and another, it took off and chased and caught a hen pheasant. But on the other side of the stream, on the other side of this little valley, suddenly there's a tumble and they ended up in the water. And obviously I'm quite alarmed at that, but couldn't quickly get to them to the bird or the pheasant, I ended up using my telemetry system and tracking the bird and thinking, no, it's it just seemed incredible how far away and the signal that was getting so far away, and can't be. I've not even seen him sort of get back to the air or anything. As time went on, the tension started growing, and I had to say to these people, just let me go and find my bird now, because this is getting serious. And it was quite a steep incline on the sides of this valley. And I thought, I'm now getting a stronger signal, and I'm still checking in and checking. And the bird just ended up, I just thought, this is very close now. And I just saw him, and he'd walked up this hillside, and I mean, maybe a 1 in 4, 1 in 5 hillside, steep incline, and walked back to me. Not with the pheasant, unfortunately, but it was absolutely drenched, and I think he was just so wet that he couldn't have got back to me by flying. But still, he made the effort to come back to me, and I thought, wow, that it all went wrong, but at least he's come back to me.
Yeah.
I sat there, wrapped him up in a towel, and inside my jacket, warmed him up, and 20 minutes later, he's off again as though nothing had happened. And I thought, yeah, this is again a good day, albeit it could have gone drastically wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough whenever you have to come home empty-handed after something that that it would have been nice to have the pheasant in hand, and everything at the end of the day. But it's one of those falconry cliches that we often refer back to anytime you come home with your bird in the box. It's been a good day.
A good day, yeah, absolutely,
as the saying goes. But well, that's great, and I mean, like I said, it's always nice talking to fellow Harris hawkers and stuff too, so we can just kind of get an occasional rib into the other Ostringers, and stuff, and the goshawk flyers and stuff. It's an ongoing joke with my group. So
I do often go out with a friend who has a goshawk, and he's made 1 or 2 significant comments. And one of the things, and he's flown Harris hawks in the past, and he said to me at one point, with a Harris hawk like that, you don't need a goshawk because of the way that my particular bird will fly. And that there is always some comment made between us about his bird sitting in the tree. We'll just sit down and wait. I'll go back to the vehicle, and while you catch your bird up, and and then when he's seen mine, and I've just whistled him, and he's returned from the saw straight to the glove, and he's sort of he's said to other people, and that's how to recall a Harris hawk and things like that, so he does sort of appreciate what we get, but there is always that little niggle between the Harris hawkers and the goshawkers, I think. And so what? As long as it's not with any malice.
Well, sometimes even if there is malice, sometimes it makes it even more fun occasionally. let's just be real. I mean, come on, we can afford to be a little politically incorrect, at times. I mean, it is fun to kind of to rib to that degree, So, well, and I guess it would be a good note to end on, like we usually do, or like I usually do with people, and have been for a while. I mean, what do you think would be the best piece of advice that you can think of or a sentiment that you can think to maybe leave current and prospective falconers?
And I think with any animal, the classic one has got to be, don't ever think that you've seen it all or know it all, because that's the time when you'll be proved wrong. And just be willing to listen, and learn from it, because sometimes some of the older guys like me have seen a lot of stuff and have a lot of experiences, and you don't have to make mistakes to learn from them. You can learn from other people's experiences, not necessarily the mistakes, but their experiences. And again, if people are being open and honest, sometimes we have bad days, but move on to the next morning. I think move on to the next morning and just keep going with it. It's really, I love it. I love it, and I always have. Whichever bird I'm flying, and I have messed with, and I mean messed with goshawks, but they're not. You don't have the bond like with the Irish hawk, I don't think. But yeah, as I say, just try not to ever think that you know it all. Is perhaps the best bit of advice I'd give to people.
Perfect. Well, hopefully we can. I don't know, apologies to also the people that have been listening to this and also been hearing the torrential downpour, and, I tried my best to clean up the audio as much as possible, but it's been interesting just hearing just this torrential downpour come and go, this whole conversation, and hopefully, I mean, that's the great thing about meets too, is ultimately you do want to see hunting, but at the same time, it's always nice to sit and have conversations and socialize and get to meet and kind of converse with other falconers like yourself that are from other places and you meet for the first time. So this has been very enjoyable. And I mean, is there any last thing that you can think of?
No. I will talk about hawks forever and a day, but let's not get into that.
Well, fair enough. Well, I guess we can go ahead and call this good then, and we can just kind of hang out for a bit and see what the rest of the day brings. I guess.
Yeah, sure. Looks like it might brighten up now.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'm sure that we'll be fooled and it'll start just freaking deluging again here any second. But anyway, it's been nice meeting you, Steve. And, like I said, I appreciate you doing this on kind of short notice. And
No, it is.
Like I said, it's been a good talk. So
Good.
All right.
Thank you.